Hello, Greek students, and welcome to Adullam Media's Romans chapters 1 through 3 with Dr. Rob Plummer. Today, we'll be talking about vocabulary building with gntvocab.com. The first thing you need to do is log into gntvocab.com. The welcome page lets you know that we require a user account in order to use this system. We don't sell your account information to anybody, and the accounts are only used so that you can keep track of your progress across platforms. Whether you're using a smartphone, a tablet, a laptop, or a PC, all of your information is saved and you never lose your progress. So go ahead and click on the sign in or sign up button. If you've already used gntvocab.com before, you'll be signing in. If not, you'll be signing up. So here's the login page for gntvocab.com. Again, if you have never signed up for an account before, go ahead and click down here where it says sign up. You'll submit your email address and a password, and then you'll receive a validation email in order to get into the system. However, if you already have an account, just add your email address and password information now and click continue. So we've simulated logging in with a new account. And if you've never used gntvocab.com before, this is exactly what you'll see. You'll notice that there are no learned words here, and your overall accuracy is 0%. We have a learning rate slider here, which goes from 5% all the way to 100%. And what this means is this is how quickly you expect to learn words. We also have a settings page. Notice that right now the include proper names toggle is checked on, which means that any new words that include proper names will be included in our list of vocabulary. Some people click this toggle off because they don't feel it's important to learn to memorize proper names, but you have this option available for you based upon your preferences. We also have sound effects that are available, which give small little reinforcements of positive answers and incorrect answers. You can choose to turn that on or turn that off. There's also a slider that tells us how many new words we will receive once we've completed a current set of words. So if you'd like to learn very quickly, you can get 10 new words at a time. If you prefer to learn more slowly, you can move that down to the left, even all the way down to one new word at a time. But just do that based upon your preferences. We also have an option lately added to include a different gloss language. By default, it's for English, but we also have Spanish, German, and two forms of Chinese available. So if you are a non-English student, you have some options available for you. We are trying to expand the list of foreign languages available here, but those are future upgrades that we plan to make. So here are the settings that you have on your page. So let's go back to the learning page and we'll talk about a few more things that you want to learn preparing for this Romans 1 through 3 class. Now up here on the top of your page is the filters button. So let's click that first. By default, for a new account, you'll see a filter by book, and that means book of the New Testament. Now, if you leave all of these check boxes unchecked, you'll just learn all the words of the Greek New Testament in order of frequency. So the most frequent words in the Greek New Testament, you receive those first. But if you just wanted to learn Matthew, your list of words would be limited to 1,677 words. Now, you might be saying to yourself, since this is a class on Romans, let's check the Romans checkbox. That would give you 1,054 new words to learn. However, this class is only on the first three chapters of the book of Romans. So what we want to do is click this filter drop down and choose chapter. And then we can choose another book, Romans, and then we can choose any of the chapters from that book of Romans. Now, I would suggest to you that the better way to do it, rather than checking all three chapters of the book of Romans, is since we're going sequentially through the book, to start with chapter one, learn those 230 words, and then learn the words from chapters two and then three. So let's start with chapter one and we'll go through the learning process so that you see how this works. We'll go back to the Learning tab and we click Start Learning. Now, again, if this is your first time through gntvocab.com, you may be unfamiliar with how this works. But if you have any new words or words that you've recently missed during the testing phase, you begin by seeing a flashcard, if you will, with the Greek word on top and then an English definition on the bottom. So all you'll do is learn that Greek word, learn that definition, and when you think you've got that word learned, you tap on the card or click it, and we'll move to the next card. Now notice this progress bar along the bottom that will expand as we go along with our learning. So we have the word Amy, I am, exist. I know that one. So then we move along. And as we keep clicking along, that progress bar along the bottom keeps progress with us, telling us how far along we are with all of our cards that we need to learn. So let's move all the way to the end. And once we get to that last card, we click on it, and now we've entered the quizzing stage. So it will show you the cards that you've just seen, but now you have to choose the correct answer. So we have autos, aute, auta. That's the personal pronoun. And we know that that is he, she, it, self, or the same. So we click that button and we move along to the next card. And now we've reached the end of this list of flashcards because our progress is all the way to the right. So let's click on that last card. Now, remember that our settings were set about two-thirds to the right in our learning rate. And now we get to see our list of cards again, but up here in the learned status, there's a little pie chart there. And notice how there's just one little wedge that's done that represents 1/6 of that pie. That means that we still have to answer this flashcard correctly 5 more times before it's considered learned. And once we've learned all of our flashcards 5 more times, we'll begin seeing new words based upon those in chapter 1 of Romans. Now we're going to simulate moving through the learning process, and then we'll get to the end of that and we'll catch up again. So now we've simulated going through the first chapter of Romans using gntvocab.com. Notice how we have 223 words learned here, but in my settings, I've turned off the include proper names toggle. So we've got 223 words, and notice how the overall accuracy is pretty high. You'll find that once you start using this, your accuracy will typically be well above 99%. And if it's not, you won't advance and you won't receive new words at a time. Now, notice how it's 223 words, but when we go to the filters, we see that chapter 1 has 230 words, but because of that proper name toggle being turned off, we see that there are 7 proper names in the first chapter of Romans, which isn't surprising. We've got Paul, Jesus, Christ is a proper name. The city of Rome is a proper name. So there are several proper names in the first chapter of Romans that keeps us from learning all the words. So if you're going through your first chapter of Romans and you keep seeing the same words over and over again, but you're not receiving any new words, it's probably because you've actually learned all the non-proper name words in chapter 1. But I also want to show you something very important about how GNT vocab works. Notice how in chapter 2 there are 164 unique words, but because of the words we've learned in chapter 1, we've already learned 63 of those words, which are also in chapter 2. I also want to show you something else. If we go back up here to learning by book, when we look at the entire New Testament, we have applied those 223 words throughout the entire New Testament. In fact, about half of the words in 2nd and 3rd John are already learned. So if you want to continue learning the words of the Greek New Testament, you can continue that learning using gntvocab.com because all of your learning keeps adding on top of it. And you'll notice that even though you receive some very common words early on in your learning, those words appear far less frequently as you learn more words. And that's how the system is designed to expand your vocabulary, to see these words frequently that you see all the time, and you learn them well. But then once you've got them learned, you see them very seldomly. So now you've finished chapter 1, and then all you have to do is add chapter 2. And I recommend that you keep chapter 1 checked because you'll want to see those words that you've already learned occasionally throughout your learning. So we've added chapter 2, and now when we go to the learning phase, again, we start learning new words, beginning with the most frequent words that appear in chapter 2. And this will go on throughout your learning through chapters 1, 2, and 3. Now, I encourage you that learning Greek is a lifelong journey. It's not something that we finally attain. It's not something that we get to one point and then we're done learning. But I also want to encourage you that the book of Romans is perhaps one of the most important books to us theologically, especially in chapters 1, 2, and 3. In fact, to give you some personal background on myself, I was 19 years old when I was first exposed to Christianity. I was an avowed atheist and I was in the military, but our chaplain invited me to a Bible study and I decided to come along. During those Bible studies, we studied the book of Romans, and I had been exposed to the sin and the weight and the guilt that I had been carrying around for my entire life. And as we studied chapters 1 and 2, those words of Paul merely confirmed the guilt that were on my shoulders and continuing on for the first part of chapter 3. But once Paul got to Romans 3:21 and following, I saw that the weight of my sin and the guilt that I bore was not for me to carry anymore, but that Jesus took on my sin, he took on my guilt, he took on everything and cleansed me of that sin, and I am now free. So, as you continue to study the book of Romans, I pray that these words that you learn are not just adding additional data in your brain cells, but as you learn the words, learn to read the Greek New Testament, to understand it, to be transformed by it, to be changed by it, so that the Word of God would dwell richly within you. So thank you for this opportunity to share GNT vocab with you, and I pray that your studies in the book of Romans would be very profitable.